Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin, an American artist whose work, I gotta say, is as captivating as his life story.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's cool is we've got some unique sources to work with here, right? Not just your typical art book stuff, but also excerpts from, get this, the Amazon listing for Bob Camblin and Complete Works VO1.
Oh, wow. That's pretty meta, isn't it? Using an Amazon listing as a source. I'm kind of curious, though. Why that?
Well, it actually provides a lot of context, believe it or not. Like, it sets the stage for his whole artistic journey. It hints at some of those key themes that we'll be uncovering.
Oh, like that idea of metamorphosis, right. I saw that pop up a few times. It seems to be a big deal in his work.
Huge. And it's connected to so many things, like his childhood fascination with The Wizard of Oz. It's almost like a thread that runs through his whole life.
Oh, okay. So speaking of beginnings, let's start at the very beginning. Camlin was born in 1928 in Ponca City, Oklahoma. And guess what? Both his parents were artists.
So basically, he's immersed in art from day one. I mean, the book even mentions he was the art director for his high school yearbook.
Wow. So clearly art wasn't just a hobby for him. It was like in his DNA.
It seems that way. But it wasn't just his family. Ponca City itself played a big role in shaping his vision. This wasn't just some sleepy little town. It was transformed by the oil boom.
Yeah.
There was this energy, this sense of possibility.
Right. And that whole larger than life thing is reflected in some of the architecture and stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
the Marland Estate, that massive mansion built by an oil tycoon. The book mentions how Camblin was fascinated by it.
Oh, yeah, the Marland Estate. It was this over-the-top world of, like, art and antiques from all over the globe. I bet that grandeur, that sense of spectacle, that had an impact on him.
And then there's the Pioneer Woman statue, this iconic symbol of like strength and resilience in the face of hardship. It's hard to imagine that not leaving an impression on a young artist.
Definitely not. It's almost like those contrasting elements. The extravagant wealth of the Marland Estate and then the raw, almost mythical power of the Pioneer Woman. It's like they set the stage for the complex themes that we see in his later work.
It's fascinating how seemingly random things from your childhood can end up, shaping your entire outlook on life.
Totally. And speaking of formative experiences, we can't forget about The Wizard of Oz. The book mentions how captivated he was by the film.
Yeah, I mean, who wasn't, right? It's a classic for a reason. But for Camblin, who knows? Maybe it was more than just entertainment. Maybe it sparked something deeper, this fascination with transformation, with journeys of self-discovery.
It wouldn't surprise me. And I think those themes, they definitely come into play later on.
Okay, so we've got this young artist already immersed in a world of creativity, and then he gets this even deeper exposure to art, to beauty, to possibility.
Right, right. And then, as he's finding his footing, he heads off to art school, the Kansas City Art Institute. And guess what? He bumps into his old high school buddy, Forrest Harrisberger, who's also there.
Oh, wow. What are the chances? It's like fate, right?
Yeah, seems like it. And their friendship, it actually becomes really important for both of them, like this source of support and inspiration during a pretty crucial time in their lives.
Yeah, I can imagine. Art school can be intense, but then just as they're getting into the swing of things, boom, the Korean War breaks out. They both get activated and sent off to California.
Talk about a curveball, right? I mean, from the creative haven of art school to the strict discipline of the military, that had to be a jarring experience.
Totally. But you know what's amazing? Even amidst all that chaos, Camblin never gives up on art. The book describes him as a voracious reader even during class.
He was a curious guy, always learning, always pushing himself. And that intellectual curiosity, I think that's key to understanding his art. He wasn't just about technique. He was trying to make sense of the world, to delve into its mysteries and express them through his work.
So we have this young artist shaped by these like really diverse experiences, this unique upbringing, this thirst for knowledge, and then this sudden disruption. It makes you wonder how it all comes together, how it all feeds into his art.
Yeah, and to see how those threads really start to weave together, we need to follow him across the ocean to a place that becomes his own personal Emerald City, if you will, Italy.
Oh, Italy, the land of art, history, and maybe a whole new chapter for Camblin. Can't wait to hear more about that. Last time we left off with Camblin about to head to Italy on this Fulbright scholarship, and he even calls Venice his Emerald City. So clearly that Wizard of Oz thing, that really stuck with him.
Yeah, for sure. It's like certain themes from his childhood.
Yeah.
They just keep popping up at these key moments. And Venice is kind of a perfect fit for that whole idea of transformation and escape.
Mm.
I mean, think about it. The canals, the architecture, that mix of beauty and decay. It's almost dreamlike.
The book talks about how captivated he was by the atmosphere, the light, the history. It's almost like he was stepping into one of his own paintings, right?
Mm.
All those sensory experiences, they had to have influenced his style, don't you think?
I think so. When you look at his work from this period, you start to see this shift toward more fluid forms, this blurring of lines between what's real and what's imagined.
Yeah.
It's like he's inviting us into his own personal Emerald City,
Mm.
a world where anything's possible.
And he's not just passively soaking it all in, right? He's actively engaging with the art world there. The book mentions how much time he spent at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and then there's that whole other side, the Capuchin catacombs of Palermo.
Whoa, yeah. The Uffizi with all those Renaissance masterpieces, and then the catacombs with, like, the skeletal remains, the whole mortality thing. Talk about two totally different experiences. It's wild.
You gotta wonder how he reconciled those two things. The beauty and grandeur of the Renaissance with well, the stark reality of death.
Yeah, maybe that tension, that contrast, it became a driving force for him. It's definitely a theme we see a lot in his work, this interplay between light and shadow, life and death, that whole cyclical thing.
And it's not just about the visuals, right? Camblin was a deep thinker. He was fascinated by the ideas behind the art, the philosophy, the psychology. He wanted to go beyond the surface.
Absolutely. He wasn't content with just replicating what he saw. He wanted to understand the why, the how, the deeper meaning.
So Italy was a catalyst, no doubt. It pushed him to grow, to experiment, to really find his voice. And the art world took notice. He actually gets to exhibit at the Chicago Art Institute, which is a pretty big deal, especially for someone so early in their career.
Definitely a sign that he's on the right track. He comes back to the States with this new confidence, this clarity about who he is as an artist. But the transition back, well, it wasn't always smooth sailing.
Yeah, I was curious about that. The book mentions him working as a map maker for TWA for a while. Seems like an odd choice after all that success in Italy.
I know, right? But it kind of speaks to the reality of being an artist. Sometimes you got to pay the bills, even if it means taking a detour.
That's the struggle, isn't it? Balancing your passion with, practical stuff. But Camblin finds his way back to art. He ends up teaching at different universities, all while still exhibiting his work.
Teaching seems like a natural fit for him, right? This way to share his knowledge, his love of art. But his time in Salt Lake City wasn't exactly a highlight. He actually calls the art scene there Philistine.
Ouch. Sounds like he wasn't a fan. That's pretty harsh, isn't it? Philistine.
Yeah, no kidding. He just wasn't feeling it there. He felt like they just didn't get him. And this is where we start to see his artistic philosophy really taking shape. He's not interested in making art that just pleases people. He wants to challenge conventions, to make people think, to create something meaningful.
So he's looking for a more receptive audience?
Yeah.
And he finds it in Houston, right? The book mentions how much he thrives in that art scene, how much more open it is to experimentation and pushing boundaries.
Oh, yeah. Houston was huge for him. It's like he finally found the space he needed to really blossom. The list of exhibitions he does there, it's impressive.
So it's not just about recognition or commercial success, though, right? He has this strong vision for how art should be experienced, how it should interact with the viewer.
Right, right. He was really critical of how galleries and museums presented art. He felt like they interfered too much, like they didn't create the right environment for people to really connect with the work.
There's that part in the book where he talks about giving artists a month to actually work in the gallery space and then another month to exhibit the finished pieces,
Yeah.
like turning the gallery into a studio almost.
Yeah, it's a radical idea. But it shows how much he believed in the process, that direct connection between the artist and the viewer without all the, I don't know, the stuffiness of the traditional gallery setting.
And that ties into his whole faith and good work thing, right? He believed in the art itself, not the money. I mean, there's even that story about the patron who paid him by putting the cash in a glass tube so Camblin wouldn't have to touch it.
It's like, wow, talk about dedication.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to let anything compromise his vision. He was driven by something deeper, this belief in the power of art to transform people, to make them see the world differently.
Okay, so we've got this complex artist with this strong philosophy, but how are we, the viewers, supposed to approach his work? I mean, there's all these layers, all these symbols, these hidden images. Where do we even begin? It's kind of intimidating, isn't it?
You know what's cool? He doesn't give us all the answers. He wants us to figure it out, to become part of the process. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so we've explored Camblin's life, his journey to finding his artistic voice, and his very strong opinions on, the art world and how things should be done. But now let's really dig into the art itself. The book spends a lot of time on his later work, especially the stuff from the 70s. What kind of changes do we see during this period?
Well, this is where things get, I don't know, kind of wild. He's really pushing boundaries now, experimenting with new techniques, going deeper into those psychological and mystical themes. The book actually quotes him as wanting to, and I quote, blow our minds by, you know, blending those objective and subjective elements, creating art that engages not just our eyes, but also our subconscious.
So he's not just trying to depict the world as it is, right? He's tapping into something deeper, something more, I don't know, symbolic, dreamlike, maybe.
Right. And this is interesting. The book mentions The Painted Word by Tom Wolfe, that critique of modern art being too reliant on language and interpretation. And it's like Camblin is playing with that idea.
Oh, that's cool. So he's aware of the criticism, but he's also using it almost like turning it on its head.
Exactly. Like he's saying, yeah, I'm going to make you think, I'm going to make you work for it. He often incorporates text into his drawings, but it's not always straightforward. The book points out that sometimes it's a clue, but sometimes it's a red herring.
Oh, that's tricky. I mean, that's kind of fun though, right? It's like he's turning the whole viewing experience into a game, a puzzle.
Hmm.
And speaking of puzzles, let's talk about those hidden images. Those are kind of his signature, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. The book mentions how they're often, camouflaged
Yeah.
within the larger piece. So you have to really look closely to find them.
It's like a treasure hunt.
Yeah,
And the treasure is, well, the image itself, but also the act of discovering it.
exactly. And it creates this whole other level of meaning, this dialogue between what's visible and what's hidden, what's conscious and subconscious. It's like he's pulling you into this secret world, sharing something just between you and the artwork.
This makes me think back to those early influences we talked about, the Marland Estate, the Wizard of Oz. It's like those themes of, hidden rooms, secret worlds. They're finding their way into his techniques.
Totally. And remember how we talked about his interest in surrealism? Well, a lot of those techniques, distorted perspectives, unexpected juxtapositions, they all come into play here.
Can you give me an example? I'd love to see how it all comes together in a specific piece.
Sure. Let's take Jars of Water from 1973. On the surface, it's just a still life, jars of water on a table. Pretty simple, right?
Mhm.
But if you look closer, the perspective is a little off, creating this uneasy feeling. And the jars, they seem to glow, almost like they have a light source inside them. Plus, the water distorts everything behind it, so it's like this shifting, almost hallucinatory effect.
So it's familiar, but then it's also not. It's like he's taking something ordinary and making it strange, making it magical.
Exactly. And then you add those hidden images, which he never reveals, by the way.
Yeah.
It just adds to the mystery. He wants us to find them, but he also wants us to interpret them, to bring our own experiences and perspectives to the work.
So it's not just about, oh, look, I found the hidden image. It's about what that image means to you, what it makes you think about, how it changes your understanding of the piece.
Yes, that's what makes his work so engaging, so thought-provoking. It's not passive. You have to actively participate in the process of uncovering his meaning.
So the 70s are clearly a period of intense exploration for him, pushing boundaries and all that. But what about the 80s, the last decade of his career? Does his style continue to evolve, or does he refine what he's already established?
Well, the book describes the 80s as kind of a culmination of everything that came before. Like he's taken all those threads, the surrealism, the symbolism, the metamorphosis, and woven them into this incredibly intricate tapestry. The drawings and watercolors become even more complex, with even more expertly hidden images.
It sounds like he's achieved this amazing mastery where technique and concept are just perfectly balanced. I keep thinking about that line from the Amazon listing, how sometimes a painting will hang on the wall for decades and then suddenly this secret image will finally emerge.
It gives me chills,
Yeah.
It's like his work has this power to surprise you, to reveal itself over time. And isn't that the mark of a truly great artist? Creating something that continues to resonate, to offer new insights long after it's been created?
I think so. And wow, what a deep dive this has been. From those early days in Oklahoma to Italy to finding his artistic home in Houston, Camblin's journey is truly inspiring. And his work, it's challenging, it's playful, it's thought-provoking. There's just so much there to explore. So for our listeners, I encourage you to seek out his work, spend some time with it, and see what you discover. You might just find your own personal connection to this remarkable artist.